Welcome, I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher, from our BizVision studios in the UK. You're watching the BVTV network. When I saw the book created by my guest today, I instantly knew it was totally appropriate for our Today's Leader channel. In fact, my guest gave me a lead in where she says on the inside flap on the dust cover here, today's leaders from top executives to frontline managers are ill-equipped to promote engagement in the people that they lead. This is the book, Manage to Engage, How Great Managers Create Remarkable Results. So please meet its author, the CEO of global management consultancy, Proudfoot. Welcome, Pamela Hackett. Hello, Pamela.
Oh, Malcolm, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It is. Now, come on. It's great to be here, but where are you? There.
Well, I'm still in quasi lockdown in Toronto. I think we've been in and out of lockdown for the last 18 months, but I think we're almost out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I bet you selected Toronto. I love Toronto. It's a fabulous city, isn't it? I bet you selected, you think, oh, we're going to have lockdown soon. I better dash off to Toronto.
Well, we're such a global company, but I live in Toronto. I had not spent more than a few days here each year. And then, of course, with lockdown, I have become very familiar with Toronto again.
Right. Lovely city, lovely city. Pamela, I've got a confession to make to you about your fascinating book. I took my wife for a COVID jab, and I settled down to read your book as there's quite a long queue for the jab. I got so absorbed in it that she was bashing on the car window, having had her jabs. Now that hasn't happened a lot since I was a very, very young boy, absorbed in the Beano the Dandy comic. It really is a great book for today's leaders. I've got to say that it really is.
Oh, thank you.
Viewers and listeners, in this BBTV show, I'll be talking to Pamela in 3 parts, and we are totally talking about employee or people engagement. In part 1, I want to ask Pamela, what's the state of employee engagement today in this new and altered business world? In part 2, I want to ask her, what causes disengagement and how should leaders watch out for such areas of lost confidence? And in part 3, I'm asking her to help viewers and listeners, that's you, take action by dipping into her 5 principles. Pamela, before we get into that 3-part talk, though, can you briefly introduce yourself to my viewers and listeners? Who is Pamela Hackett and what prompted you to write this great of the moment book?
Sure. Well, CEO of Proudfoot Consulting, and Proudfoot's been around for about 75 years, and we help companies get really big bottom line results, improvement in their bottom line results. But what's really important about the way that we do that is you can have all the knowledge in the world around your supply chain or the way that you are actually going to do a safe quality daily blast in your mine. It's really, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you can have all that knowledge. But at the end of the day, unless you can get people to move and to move with you, you're not going to get the kind of results that you want. And so Proudfoot as a company, and I've been in Proudfoot 35 years, and please, I still say I joined when I was about 12 because I hadn't thought about how old I am now.
Well, I didn't think you were the 75,
I'm getting up there. But what's really important in that kind of 35-year career is the one thing that's been really common to all the best companies that I've worked with and that many of my colleagues have worked with is the way that they engage people. And if you look at all the stats around the world on transformation and getting improvement programs going, the big stumbling block is always getting people on board. And so again, if you haven't figured out that nothing moves until people move, then you're going to really struggle to get the kind of results that you want. So the big thing for me was to really make that link between the engagement side of a business, how you actually manage your people, versus productivity and profitability. And you can have all 3. You can do people, productivity, and profitability. And if you do that well, then you're going to get remarkable results. But you can't do one without the other. It's that old 3-legged stool kind of conversation.
Yeah. It's brilliant. And as I say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I was, again, a silly story again, but I had to go for a medical observation in the hospital just recently, a couple of weeks ago, an endoscopy, where they stick a camera down and they zoom into your body. And there was the head consultant and the team all around. And after they'd finished, I know, okay, I was a bit blurry, but all I could hear was her saying to a team, right, I'm off now to elsewhere, but I want to congratulate you. Great job. Well done there. Well, and as she left the room, you felt the buzz. From the whole time. Yeah, you felt the whole buzz, that the team, that they felt very proud that they were working together. They've been recognized. Yeah.
And isn't that it? The simple fact that somebody connects with their team is a big starting point. It's a big step forward in the engagement stakes. And believe it or not everybody has that.
No, I totally agree. And it's a bit of an anathema, isn't it, for many leaders who have sat in their corner office with the glass door and everything shut, and suddenly having to become visible and talk to people.
Yeah.
Okay, Pamela, let's start with part one then. I know this may be a hard question because we're in a continuing fluid situation, aren't we? But what's the state of employee engagement today in this new and altered business world?
Yeah, so disappointingly, it's much the same as it was as we entered the pandemic. And I think that's really the crux of the problem. You're not going to be able to solve today's problems if we have exactly the same situation as going into the pandemic, which was we had a pretty icy or a really icy workforce. Lots of people who, I think the stats back then are pretty much the same now. And that's that you could look around, if you had a meeting with 10 people in it, you could probably bank on an average company having about 8 of those guys who are not really engaged in your business. And that's a bit scary. 80% of the people are actually thinking to themselves, I'm not really interested in this meeting. What am I going to be doing next? And now, of course, coming out of the pandemic, you've got even more interesting stats. And I say interesting because it's not so much that people are turned off work. You're not talking about an entirely disgruntled workforce. What you're talking about is people who are really reassessing their work and they're saying to themselves, geez, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this kind of work? Do I want to work for this company? And so you've got more than half of them that are actually looking for another job. And that's because they're looking for something that's going to be more interesting, more fulfilling, personally more satisfying than the job that they're in.
Yeah. And do you think a lot of that is also because of the different types of generations, like millennials? I'm a baby boomer, so I'm past it now. But millennials, Generation Zers, who have got a lot different interest. The money isn't necessarily their goal. They've got a conscious mind. They're interested, obviously, in the planet and things like that. Do you think that's a challenge for many leaders as well?
I think that's got a lot to do with it, but I actually don't think that the different demographics are now what the problem is. It's not so much that people don't understand that a millennial is interested more in the planet than they are in the waste that you've got in your, on your plant floor or in your factory. I think that today it's bigger than that. I think that everybody is reassessing. I was really interested to see one of the hosts of the BBC, long time, 30-year employee, Catty, and her name has just escaped me, but she actually announced on her, that she was moving on. And that's not a millennial. That's someone who's been through a pandemic. They've worked 30 years with a business, and they're now saying, you know what, there's something else I could be doing, and I can probably make a difference in another way. So that just tells you that if you're in business today, you've got a big challenge. You're coming out of a pandemic, and you're either overwhelmed with business because you're in the right business, or you're underwhelmed with business, and therefore you need all your people to really rally behind you and get out in front of you and make a difference. And so either way, you need your people to show up 100%. And that just tells you that you've got a big job ahead of you, because they're not going to do that unless you can figure out how to really engage them differently than you did in the past.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting to talk about as we get further into our interview there. But before we move to part two, I'd just like to remind viewers and listeners of your website URL, your website address, which is obviously, viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me. But for listeners, it's all the W's, Pamela, Pamela, Pamela Hackett. And Hackett is HACKETT, PamelaHackett.com. pragmatic.com. And your book is called, here it is, Manage to Engage, How Great Managers Create Remarkable Results. And it's published by Wiley. Pamela, time for part two. Perhaps a simple question, but often not addressed. I want to ask you, what causes disengagement and how should leaders watch out for such areas or what might be regarded as, I say, lost confidence?
Yeah, so the big thing, the big message here is that disengagement doesn't come because you've got bad HR policies or because you don't have enough perks or because you don't have the right ping pong tables in the business. Disengagement, under-engagement, people who don't feel great about showing up at work every day, that's in the hands of the immediate boss. So your absolute boss, your team leader, the guy who looks after you, the person that you're on their team, that person has the biggest impact on your engagement. And that's a remarkable thing that a lot of leaders, particularly the new leaders, guys who have just been promoted and they just don't understand the absolute impact that they have on day-to-day engagement, which means that they're having a direct impact on the results of the business because the two go hand in hand. But I think it's really important to say one critical thing, and that's that I don't think it's because of culpability. I don't think people get up in the morning and think, that's it, I'm not going to engage anybody. I'm going to do a really bad job today. No, they get up and they've got all these balls in the air and plates spinning. They've got everything coming at them. Particularly today, it's getting more and more high pressure on management at every level, leaders at every level, that they either don't have the capability or they don't have the capacity. And so we've got to, the people who are in a position to change that, we've got to make sure that we set those guys up for success. We've got to give them either the capacity or the capability to manage to engage. And I think that when the penny drops, when leaders at every level really do recognize that it's me, it's the way that I manage, and my ability to manage to engage is actually going to have a huge impact on my team and the way they engage, and therefore the results that my team gets.
Yeah, I think it must be hard for some leaders, though, to actually change their, we'll call it modus operandi, the way they've always done things. And so, start to be looking at understanding their employees, talking to them about their own personal relationships. I mean, I'm sort of fortunate that I'm not having that sort of problem. But, yesterday my favorite aunt died. A week ago, we had to have our dog put down. He was my 14-and-a-half-year-old friend, and there's numerous other things going around at the moment. So if I was in a business, I'd probably be taking those issues to work. I can't really park them, can't I? It doesn't work in your brain doesn't allow that. Though. So surely leaders must be finding it hard then now to be considerate, conscious. That's the word, probably conscious with their employees.
Yeah, and I think that the important thing there, so you hit it on the head, connecting with your people and actually having that personal conversation that in the past we said, oh no, don't get too close to your employees. I think in today's world that's rubbish. It's the best way to really say it. You've got to connect with people. You've got to know what's going on in their lives, because you're absolutely right. What they do in their world comes to work, and what you do by day goes home with them by night. So it's a two-way street. But I think what's really interesting about, and we've, as Proudfoot, the company that I lead, we've done 50,000 projects around the world with clients for the last many decades. And we found that when we went back and researched, okay, what makes a really well-led business? Who are the guys who engage their people best? And what are the traits of the leaders at every level that do something different? And what we found was a really interesting fact, and that's that the more visible, the more active the management, the better the results. And so you can have all of the technology in the world. You can be in the best marketplace. You can have customers that are just knocking your doors down to get your product. But unless you have active management who are involved in the business, connecting with people, unless they're in the game, you are not going to get the results that you need. And so I think that's a really interesting thing, because what it shows and what it puts a spotlight on is that as a leader, the kind of rhythm you bring to your day, how you show up, how you connect, how regularly and routinely you connect actually has the huge impact on results.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks, Pamela. Now for part 3, and it's time for action. Now, supposing that our watching leaders agree, and that's a first step, by the way, that their employees, some or all, may be disengaged. What action can they take? Can we dip into your 5 principles?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of action that can be taken, and a lot of it is really pragmatic. So the number one thing is to park all your thoughts that HR is going to save the day. We love HR, and you can go and get some advice from them, but it is actually your pragmatic solutions that are going to make a difference, how you behave day to day. So there's a couple of different ways to look at this. There's the more conceptual way that says, okay, what are all the things that you've got to know to be able to really enable somebody to feel more engaged at work? So in that regard, I talk about the 2 F's and 7 C's, and it's a scorecard that gives you the ability to look at your business and say, okay, if I look at my 2 F's and I start with something that I call fair trade. At the end of the day, unless you've got a fair trade in your business, that's a table stake. People have to feel that they show up for work, they get a fair day's trade. They do a great job, and in return they get something. So that you've got to fix that. If you haven't fixed that, you're not going to be able to do anything else. It's a real deal breaker. But then you've got also the very other end of the scale, which is freedom, and enabling people to feel that you're going to get out of the way and let them do their job. So that ability to really be free in the way that you actually show up, in the way that you enable your people to show up, is a really big deal. So if you use those kind of as the bookends of then what we call the 7 C's. And when you're talking about the 7 C's, you're talking about giving people a cause, the ability to actually, to have something to want to get out of bed. I just can't imagine what it's like to roll out of bed with a thud instead of rolling out of bed with a bit of a bounce, So you want to give them a cause. You want to make sure that you've also got, you mentioned it a couple of times, that you're building confidence in the business, that people feel confident that this business is a great place to work, that you're good, that you know what you're doing, confidence in leadership. You've also got a whole bunch of other C's. Connection is the big one. That goes with collaboration. It also goes with community building. And then, of course, you've got capability building. If you don't know how to do your job, then it's going to be really tough to show up to do that job. And then there's another table stake, which is a clean environment, processes and systems that work for you and not against you. Things that aren't going to trip you up every day. It's the old story of you get to work and then all this wonderful technology, but one little thing doesn't work and it just niggles you every day. At some point, you're going to disengage. So there's that whole kind of conceptual side. And so it's important to understand what those 2 F's and 7 C's are, because you as a leader, you have the ability to actually impact those. But then there's the whole side of what does that really mean? And what's it mean to me as a leader? How do I show up? How do I put all those concepts together so that somebody actually thinks I'm actually interested in them, and I genuinely show that I care about my team? And so there's a couple of really, really pragmatic solutions. The number one, I think that's important to everyone, and you could start it absolutely now and today, is go heads up. So if you're in a business where you spend the majority of your time with your device, with your phone, with your iPad, with your technology, with your computer, with your reporting or your admin, then you need to take the time to lift your nose, lift your head up out of that device, away from that admin, and actually look, listen, and learn. Look around you and connect with your people. So heads up is a really simple one. It just says, make sure that you're balancing, prioritizing people, along with, yes, the reporting is important. Yes, you've got to have data, but you've got to connect with people. And then I'll often get asked the question, but when you say get visible, what does that mean? Does it mean that I have to, physically be out and about with my people every day? Won't they think that I'm micromanaging them? And that couldn't be further from the truth. People want to connect with their boss. And so we practice something called 1-5-30. And it is really straightforward and really simple. If you want to put a routine into your day and you want to earn the right to have great conversations with your team and learn about what's holding them back or what's stopping them from getting great results, then you want to practice 1-5-30. And it says, show up once a day, check in, not check up, check in with your guys once a day. How's it going? I'm really sorry to hear that you lost your pal of 14 years, and have a conversation about that. And that every single day. Yes, there are some workplaces where every day is overkill, but in an average company, check in once a day. That's not hard, and it's a great routine to start adopting. And then once a week, number 5. So 1, once a day, 5, once a week. Have a really meaningful conversation. That's about really getting to know somebody a little bit better and getting to know how the week has gone. What was the problems that you encountered? How can I help? What barriers can I remove? And you have a conversation about performance. And if you have that routine, you earn the right to have a performance conversation at the end of the week. And then 30 is once a month. That's when you have a really, really interesting conversation about where careers are going. Where's the job going? How does somebody feel about, this over 50% of people thinking about changing jobs? That's where you're going to catch that. And so 1-5-30 is a really good, strong routine to have with your people. And if you do that routinely, I keep using that word, routinely enough, then you've got a rhythm in the business. Then your people are not surprised by you, the boss, suddenly showing up and checking up on them. They understand that you're checking in. And isn't the only job of a boss, of a supervisor, of a team leader, their real job is just to remove anything that gets in the way of enabling their people to do great work and to get the results that the business needs. So that 1-5-30 becomes a really simple, pragmatic, and it can also, the double bonus, replace your annual performance management system. Because if you do this routinely, you've got that built in and baked into your business. But
I like that, yeah.
And more importantly, it becomes an operational performance management system, because all you're talking about every day is, how can I help you get the results? And so it becomes that real DNA, it's bringing that DNA of routine connection to work. And when you do that, all those 2 F's and 7 C's, you start to be able to see exactly where some of those things are falling down. Maybe my guys aren't collaborating enough. Maybe the teams are not really together and in sync, or maybe we don't have a good community of practice for that particular subject, that's important to them to be able to get their work done. Or maybe that part of the process isn't working for them. The more you do 1-5-30, the more you'll learn about your business, the more you'll improve the business, the better the results. And then bingo, you've got the added bonus, the better engaged you'll be, your people will be with you.
Brilliant. And I think what we can make that is an 8th C then. Do it consistently is what you're saying, isn't it? Yep.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah. And I think it is the consistency. I think when people become disgruntled, often they are because the boss just shows up ad hoc. They come in, bit of that corporate seagull, they take a look, they tell you everything that's wrong, and then they go again. And so you really want to make sure that you're consistently checking in and not doing that.
I'm totally. Look, viewers and listeners, I said at the beginning that this book, Manage to Engage, absorbed me. I think also you would agree with me that Pamela herself has managed to engage you totally in this conversation. It's certainly a book that needs to be taken down from your bookshelf, read and reread and acted upon. So many thanks for a great interview, Pamela Hackett.
Thank you, Malcolm. And I'm just so thrilled to get the word out. I think it's so necessary in today's world.